Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is another episode of Tailgate Trashtalk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We'll try to keep the energy up tonight. I'm a little under the weather. I'm going to lean on my man Bentley over here, who's still on the Fire Clayton White bandwagon. How you doing, bud?
It's always fire Clayton White, baby. Always. But I'm doing well. I'm feeling like $1,000,000. Had a
At least one
profitable
of us
weekend.
is.
Yep, very true.
Oh man. Well, let's jump right into it, man. This was a
Yeah.
brutal weekend.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of favorites struggled. Barely won, didn't cover. I'm not sure how Vegas made out. I know a lot of these weekends, sometimes Vegas can take a pounding, so maybe Vegas took as much of a beating as we did. But what's a game that pops out to you? I think we'll save probably Penn State, Ohio State for last, and
Yeah.
talk to me about another game that stuck out to you, man.
Yeah. So probably not the most interesting game to a lot of folks, but a game that spoke to me and told me things about a team that we have very high aspirations for. I'm talking about Washington and Arizona State. So we often mention on this show and just in passing and whenever you talk about college sports really or even in the NFL to a certain point, we talk about letdown games a lot, right? Texas has a loss after beating Alabama. Now it wasn't directly after, but you get these huge wins and then you kind of overlook your upcoming opponent and a lot of times you will go ahead and lose that game. The Louisville when they beat Notre Dame, right? They came back and lost the next week, right? Well, this was Washington's letdown game, in my opinion, and they managed a way to pull it out on the backs of their defense. They kicked 3 field goals and had a pick six for a touchdown. Right, the offense did not play very well, which is uncharacteristic of them, but their defense played well enough to win this game and kind of get them over the hump. And what I imagine is their letdown game, and I don't imagine they'll have another one going forward. This team is too good. They're not going to turn the ball over 4 times again in a game.
Yeah,
That's just not going to happen, right? Um, so that to me was it was a very important game going forward for the rest of the home stretch down the season.
yeah, that's the big thing, right? In college football, it's kind of undefeated or bust in a lot of these conferences, right? Maybe the Big Ten, maybe the SEC, especially, right? You can kind of survive one loss because of how stiff the competition is there, but the Pac-12, other than this year, right, has typically been undefeated or bust. Now this year, with how good the Pac-12 has been, maybe there's something to be said about that, but this would have been a bad loss, right? You can't lose to Arizona State and expect to survive it. You really would have to show something the rest of the way to make the playoff. You'd have to run the table, obviously, but you've got to beat quality opponents handily, essentially.
Yeah,
So yeah, surviving this was the most important part for Washington. Very uncharacteristic. The turnovers were really, really weird. Penix was just careless with the football.
yeah,
A couple of those throws, like, yeah, there were a couple that were kind of, he was under pressure. I think one even got tipped, but he was just really, I don't know, just out of character. I haven't seen him play this bad since he was in Indiana,
right.
um, and that says a lot in terms of a guy that's been at Washington for a couple of years now. Uh, Arizona State is a real weird enigma. Scatabo, every once in a while, like he'll do something, and you're like, is this guy Christian McCaffrey light? And maybe it's because he's white. I don't know. I may be typecasting him, but like he'll catch a pass, then he'll make a run, and he'll do this shifty thing and make someone miss. Then he'll run a dude over, and I'm like, is he right?
Is he good
Pac-12
at? Yeah.
connection. But then you look up at the scoreboard, and like Arizona's got 7 points, and you're like, okay, no, he's not. No, he's not.
Yep.
Flashes, but um, yeah, they were really really fortunate that their defense showed up because their defense has not been the strongest asset for Washington this year. The offense clearly has been. Defense picked them up. I'm with you. I agree. I don't think we're going to see Washington look this way the rest of the season. This was their wake up call, and they were fortunate that they get a wake up call in a tight win against a bad team.
Yep. For sure.
What else you got for me on the board here?
Well, another team that sort of survived the
Yeah,
onslaught at home, just
yeah,
like Washington, Oklahoma, man. Now, coming out of the Red River shootout or rivalry, whatever it's called these days, I told you that I was less impressed with Texas than I was more impressed with Oklahoma. Going into that game, Oklahoma had been blowing everybody out. They've been playing all these tune-up games, like a boxer fights tomato cans, right?
Yep.
That's essentially what Oklahoma have been doing. And then they won the Texas game, and they're like, "Oh, we're rolling to the to the Big 12 championship game, easy peasy. We're gonna beat them again in Arlington. It'll be cake." Not so fast, my friend. Not so fast. Them boys, who's man, who is it? It's the old Auburn coach who's down there at UCF, though, whose name I cannot think of off the top of my head.
Gus Malzahn.
Yeah, Malzahn. Yes, thank you. It was right
to survive over here.
Wow. He knows Dylan Gabriel. He coached Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel transferred from UCF to Oklahoma. They knew his playbook, right?
Yeah.
Now he still threw for 253 and 3 touchdowns, but like they were able to come in and rattle him a little bit. He wasn't the most accurate on the day. It wasn't his most phenomenal game that we've seen out of him, right? That was probably the Texas game.
Yeah.
But they survived an onslaught, and UCF. Did I say USC earlier? I meant UCF.
I think you said UCF. I think
UCF comes in and scores a touchdown with 1:16 to go, and then runs like a borderline trick play for the 2-point. It was weird. They like swung it out of the backfield to the left, and it was a receiver who swung out from the slot, and it looked like he wanted to throw the ball. It was a very strange. Like, you're able to score 29 points, you probably should have a normal play to run from the 2-yard line, right? I mean, that's just that's how I saw it. Your running back went for over 100 yards. Maybe give it to him. You had a receiver go for 134. Like, maybe, I don't know. Toss it on those guys. But this kind of reaffirmed in my mind that Oklahoma is not the 6th best team in the country. And barring, and we could talk about Texas with their injury status going down the road, but if Oklahoma continues this undefeated streak and goes into the Big 12 championship game, I feel really good about Texas up against them a second time around.
Yeah. Yeah, this felt like a trap game, and maybe last week we should have seen this coming. UCF had not been good this year, with like one exception. They had one game, I can't remember who they played, but they put up a bunch of points on offense. Other than that, they'd been really getting taken to the woodshed in a lot of these games. And you mentioned the 2-point conversion. Like, is that not the most Gus Malzahn thing ever, though? Like, he's always, even when he was at like Auburn, and he's always had these weird, unnecessary like gadget plays.
Yeah.
And it just felt really unnecessary there. But yeah, another kind of survive and advance type game. I worry with Oklahoma because for the first half of the season, all we had heard about was that Venables had fixed the defense, right?
Yep.
And they made some plays against Texas, and that's what kept them in that game and able to make that comeback late. You weren't going to shut Texas out, but making some plays against Ewers and being able to turn the ball over felt like, okay, maybe he has fixed the defense, and maybe they've got a little something there. And then UCF comes in and puts up, I think, 500 total yards, 140, like you mentioned, rushing, and they had a big receiver, big day, from their top wide receiver.
Yeah.
Is it fixed? Maybe not. Maybe not.
Who knows?
Maybe you're right. Those tomato cans really were kind of giving us maybe a false sense of security with the defense. Those of us that were believers, right? I know you really haven't been, but those of us that were thinking maybe Venables has got something going here. Didn't feel that way this weekend. This was a real tight game. And again, you gotta, hey Dad, you gotta survive these games.
Yes.
You're gonna make it to the Big 12 championship with a chance to get in the playoff. You gotta survive these types of games.
I don't know, man. They have to go on the road to Kansas next week. Kansas, they can score, man. Their backup quarterback threw for almost 400 against Oak State. Like,
you look at Kansas and you're like, oh, they're missing Daniels, but then Dean's been killing it, or Bean.
Yeah,
He's been killing it.
Yeah, I mean, they lost by 1 score on the road in Stillwater.
Yep.
Don't sleep on the Jayhawks, man.
Nope. Agreed. What else you want to take a look at?
All right, what do we have written down here? Oh, well, we got to talk about what, aside from Ohio State, Penn State, right? Probably the game of the weekend. It involves the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams, and the Southern California Trojans lose a close one to Utah. I was actually at a Halloween party watching this game. I was holding a 3-week-old baby in my arms. And I told him, I said, look, Cal, in 21 years, when you and I are gambling together, not my child, by the way, not my child, when you and I are gambling together in 21 years, we're going to look at the Southern California box score and we're going to say, look, 21 years ago, I told you their defense was bad. 21 years later, their defense is still really, really bad. I loved Kyle Whittingham's comment after the game. So they've got a reigning Heisman Trophy winner over there on their sideline, and we have a pig farmer as our quarterback.
Yeah.
And it tells you everything you need to know about that Utah program, dude.
Yeah.
We've said it over and over again that nobody goes into Utah and wins at night. But Utah is a good team no matter where they go. You said it week 1 about their defense, that it suffocates and that it travels.
Yep.
And that was the case, man. Like, Caleb Williams didn't have a touchdown pass in this game. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Just crazy. And they're
former future NFL owner, Caleb Williams.
Yeah. Oh, God, Jesus. That. Yeah. But, I mean, to me, they were never a national title contender, talking about Southern California. But I said it before the year, Utah is a national title contender, provided they get their quarterback back. They might be able to surprise some folks even with this backup. I mean, and they've played 2 different guys throughout the year, but even still, I mean, that defense is so freaking good that if their offensive playmakers, aside from the quarterback, can make plays to keep them in games, I would not want to see them on my schedule.
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, you put that defense in your suitcase and you can go anywhere you want and potentially win a game. I thought Kyle Whittingham showed just how savvy a game manager he is too, which goes a long way. You can ruin a game for a team if you're a bad game manager, and you can give your team an extra chance to win if you're a good game manager.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you sent me the link, and I had another group that they sent me the link where I didn't watch this whole game. I caught kind of bits and pieces. I was flipping, but it was a loaded slate in the evening with baseball going on as well, and just flipping back and forth between stuff. But they were subbing the biggest guys on defense, and they were deliberately and overtly jogging at the slowest possible pace without standing still to make substitutions. And they even forced USC to take a timeout in one situation. But they were eating the clock, letting that defense get fresh against an offense that likes to sub really fast and go really fast. Genius move by Kyle Whittingham. You put your team in a position to succeed by doing something like that.
Yeah. That's one of those funky college rules where if the offense subs, they hold the snap while the clock is running until the defense is they allow the defense to match the substitution package of the offense. And that was a distinct coaching advantage. I mean, you could honestly say this game was won on coaching. Maybe not from that specific play, but that's just one example of how, to borrow a term from the show Community, how streets ahead Kyle Whittingham is there in Utah.
Yeah, for sure. Sort of Belichickian almost, because he's always the one that finds these kind of niche rules in the NFL, and Whittingham kind of did that this weekend. So
it
was a genius move.
I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, buddy. What else you want to talk about here?
All right, so we talked about Oklahoma, right, in that Red River game. Well, let's talk about the other side of it, where Texas comes out and they just about lay an egg against Houston. Right now, their quarterback Quinn Ewers, who coming in was one of the Heisman favorites, right, like highest ranked quarterback coming out of high school ever. You know, like played at Ohio State, obviously it transferred into Texas. You know, the whole Arch Manning debacle. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Well, I think that question has been answered, right? Because we saw Quinn Ewers go down with I believe is an AC joint sprain. And he's going to be out for kind of an undisclosed amount of time, but they're looking about 4 weeks, right? I think is what I read. That being said, you can't allow Houston to hang around in this game. And I still think that Texas is a very, very good team, but I get it, in-state rivalry, the whole deal, like Houston's kind of sneaky. Got it, understood. But if you're really serious about winning the Big 12 and competing for a national title, you just can't let Houston hang around in one of these games. Even if Dana Holgorsen is on the other side, who's historically a very, very good coach. Like, in my opinion, this was a letdown game despite the injury from Texas. I just was not super impressed with them this weekend.
Yeah, and you mentioned the whole in-state rivalry thing, but, like, if you ever asked from Texas side especially, like, Is Houston a rival? Probably not, right? I get the in-state thing, but their little brother to big brother in Texas is focused on Oklahoma and some of the other Big 12 opponents that they, historically have faced. But this was one of those ones. Like they like you said, they let them hang around. It's you can't do that and expect anything to compete, like you said, at the Big 12 and potentially in the playoffs. So yeah, my dad brings up Alfred's got actually 2 colleges in the smallest town maybe in New York, and I went to Alfred State to play baseball, and we've got Alfred University across the street. They're both D3 schools now because Alfred State moved up to D3. But Rod Streeter, if you remember Rod Streeter, who ended up at Indiana and then ended up playing in the NFL, he started at Alfred State. So
nice.
There's been some talent that's come out of there. They've got a wide receiver. I forget his name, but there's a lot of rumbling right now that he may be making a move, and he's making some unbelievable plays at that level. So
nice.
I haven't really heard too much. I've heard some rumblings because I'm still connected to a lot of people back home, but on a national level, have not heard really the big buzz. But Streeter didn't really buzz until he got to Indiana, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, Juice Wells didn't buzz until he transferred from JMU to South Carolina. Like,
yep.
We saw in the NFL this week, Tyson Bagent.
Yeah,
kid played D2, right?
11 in D2.
Yeah, crazy, man.
It is wild.
These guys transfer out of these little schools and get on the national stage, and it's like, wow,
yeah,
this boy can play.
Yep, for sure. All right, another one you want to talk about, or we want to tear the Band-Aid off?
I had a couple, and I just talked to him very quickly, and then we can tear the Band-Aid off, right? Yeah. At the 7, what was it? I lost the exact number. It's like the 7.5 minute mark in the third quarter. Duke lost the game and the ACC to Florida State because Riley Leonard went out with an injury again. Yeah. I just felt really bad for them. I mean, they did absolutely nothing after he got hurt. They were in the red zone. They ended up with a field goal, and it's like their whole offense kind of circles around. They run the offense through him, right? Which is not saying much because he's a quarterback, but it's so true. They're so limited at the backup position.
Yeah.
That without him on the field, they just couldn't do anything against Florida State. And it took all the wind out of their sails too, right? Like the defense was playing very well, and he goes down, and Florida State just kind of turns it on from there.
It's hard for anyone to lose an NFL quarterback, right? But when he's that much different than the rest of your team, it's a big deal. I doubt we see him the rest of the year. That ankle is still bugging him. Maybe he soldiers on and still wants to play, but we'll see. We'll see.
He wanted to come back in that game, and the coaches were like, "Nah."
He couldn't walk on the sideline. There was no reason to put him back in that game. Unfortunately, for Duke especially.
Well, if Florida State drops a game, then potentially we see him because the other undefeated team in the ACC also lost this weekend. Yeah. North Carolina fumbled the absolute bag to freaking UVA, man.
Oh, God.
I could not believe this is a game I didn't catch a whole lot of, right? Because like you said, it was a loaded night slate.
Yeah.
But
we're tuning in.
Yeah. My. Yeah, right. You expect North Carolina to roll. They were what, I don't know. We can pull up whatever the line was.
23.5.
Yeah, 23.5, and they lose outright. Like I don't know what Mac Brown was telling his boys. Who do they play next week? Let me check that real fast. They play Georgia Tech next week. It's like this shouldn't have even been a trap game, right?
Nothing
this
to look forward to.
Exactly. I don't know if they were getting too big for their britches and thinking they're hot shit or whatever, but to me is that the worst loss of the year?
Yeah.
I think I agree.
Yeah.
I think I agree.
Yeah. That's as bad. That's as bad. That's probably worse than Colorado blowing 29 at the half, honestly. I mean,
because UNC has aspirations.
Right. They're undefeated in their conference. And if they run the table, it's hard to ignore them as potentially a playoff team, right? If you're undefeated in this year's ACC, you're probably one of the 4.
Yeah, for sure.
And they absolutely fumbled, kicked, rolled on, and then handed over the bag.
All of their NIL money should go to Virginia players.
Oh my God, so bad. Yeah, Charlottesville should be flush with NIL
Yeah.
right now.
Yep.
So bad.
And one last one before we rip the Band-Aid off. Maybe, I know we just talked about the worst loss of the year, and that was 100% on UNC. That was their fault. But the worst beat of the year, Iowa losing on a call reversal from where there were no flags of the play. It was only reversed because it was a scoring play, and all scores are reviewed. They return a punt for a touchdown that would have almost assuredly given them the game because Minnesota scored 12 points.
Yeah, and there was 19 seconds left or something.
Yeah, there's just no way, right? A freaking reversal in which the referee said there was a fair catch called. Where? I didn't see it. Did you see it?
There wasn't one. Yeah, that's probably the most heartbreaking loss maybe I've ever seen. Like the Stanford ban on the field, like all those big last minute.
Yeah.
Those were like making a play, right? Making something of whether it's the pitchy woo woo and you end up finding a seam, something like Hail Mary, that sort of Doug Flutie, right? This is the most heartbreaking loss I can recall ever seeing at any level in any sport, hands down, because they didn't blow there was no inadvertent whistle on the field.
Yep.
There was no stoppage of play on the field. Nobody stopped playing the play. Nobody on the field believed it was a fair catch call either.
Nope.
The kick team didn't stop. The return team didn't stop. His hand never got above his shoulder.
Right.
I don't know where in the review process. I tried to look up the rule because I know on a kickoff, if you hold out the T formation, that basically says like we're done, play's dead. What is weird about that is if somebody other than the person that holds up the T catches the ball, you start with the ball there, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a quirk about the kickoff rule. There's nothing about that with punts. There's nothing. The fair catch rule on punts is very explicit. It says hand held above the head and wave side to side. His hand never got above his shoulder.
No.
They didn't call it on the field. Then he scores, and the replay booth takes it upon themselves to overturn a game-winning punt return touchdown. Like, I don't know if you were ever going to convince me that there was some sort of conspiracy at the top, something. This is evidence, right? This is evidence.
Yeah.
For you NFL fans, it's funny that this weekend is the National Tight End Day and every tight end went nuts.
Yep.
But this, if ever you were going to say that like the NCAA got involved or whoever, Vegas got involved, whatever it was, this is hard to dispute. You can't overturn that. I don't know how they justified it.
It was the only play that I can think of in my college football remembrance was Michigan State, Michigan, where the Michigan State blocked the punt.
Yeah.
And return. That's the only thing that I can think of, right?
And
that was legitimate.
The surrender cobra.
The surrender cobra, exactly. And that, like you mentioned a good point, that was making a play.
It's making a play, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. This was atrocious. There's no way, shape, or form. You mentioned the rule, hand above the head, waving side to side. He had his right arm out pointing to set up his blockers.
Where the ball is.
And then he's waving so that his guy that's backing up like doesn't touch the ball. He's setting up his blockers with one hand, and then he's waving away to like get away because he's going to pick it up. He knows these are high level athletes, right? He can almost watch and see where the ball is going to bounce. So he's like, hey, get away, so I can pick it up and set up my return.
Yep.
And the freaking replay booth, unprompted, is like, well, we know he scored, but maybe his hand went up. They're judging intent at that point, and it's like,
yeah,
come on.
So for anybody out there who like doesn't understand kind of what maybe this is, right? Watch punts throughout the course of a game. I will say on more than 25%, the punter is waving his hand side to side, telling people he got out of the way.
Yeah.
And often, even then, they'll pick it up after a bounce to stop it from bouncing farther, and they'll return it for a yard or two and run out of bounds, right? Happens all the time. I don't understand how the replay booth even found a way to justify overturning that call. It's so ridiculous. It is absolutely out of bounds. They can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, so ridiculous.
It happens a lot all over college football, but I would venture to say that it happens the most in Iowa games.
Yeah.
Nobody punts more than maybe Washington, but like the Commanders. But nobody punts more than freaking Iowa and their opponents.
Yeah, speaking of Washington punting, Tressway had 350 yards of punts in the first half this
first
week.
Half?
Holy cow.
MVP Tressway, baby.
Get that dude some ice.
Unbelievable.
Oh.
Unbelievable.
Anything else before we tear this Band-Aid off?
I really don't want to talk about South Carolina this week. I've moved on to college basketball season with them.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
It makes me so sad. It makes me so sad.
Yeah.
I remember when we were good a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Far, far away. Yeah.
At least one team in Columbia won.
Yeah.
It was the Tigers.
Yeah.
At least Clemson's bad. My favorite thing going on Twitter this week is all of the Carolina fans lamenting about how bad we are. And Clemson, we should mention, also lost this week in overtime to Miami. So shout out Miami for having, that's a big win, right? Like when Clemson's still one of the better teams. They're not great, but one of the better teams. You win in double overtime. Where apparently, I'm not sure if you saw this discourse or not, but Cole Klubnik, right, the quarterback for Clemson, audibled on the final play of the game in overtime.
Really?
Yeah, he goes, I heard the play call. I went to the line, didn't like the read. I trusted my gut and changed the play, and they didn't get the first down.
That's not a good look, young man.
And then freaking Dabo said one of the most asinine things a coach could ever say. Somebody asked him in the press conference, do you have a sports psychologist on staff? He goes, yeah, of course. We have one on staff. He's probably on suicide watch right now. I'm sorry. Dabo, dog, you can't say that.
No.
You understand the tenor of the society we live in these days.
Yeah,
it's not 1987, dog. Like that may have been cool in the 90s, but you can't. You've won 2 national titles as a Division I coach in college football. You can't say that. You're turning away you're turning off so many recruits to that program just by bringing up mental health with a negative, in a negative light like that.
Yep.
I understand you're making a joke. Got it. You want to make the joke with your boys? Cool. Understood. Behind closed doors, whatever. We all make dirty jokes. Got it. Understood. You're saying that to a national audience.
Yeah. That's bad.
That's insane to me. But no, so
really bad.
To what I was talking about, right? The discourse on Twitter this week with all the South Carolina fans is like, oh, Clemson lost. They're so bad. We lost. We're so bad. The Palmetto Bowl, Clemson, South Carolina, which is the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's like, we're going to play it on Nickelodeon at 9 a.m. Or they're like, we're going to play it at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Just absolutely torching. Oh, man, it's been so great.
Yeah,
and then to make it even worse, Arkansas, who scored 3 points this week, went out and fired their offensive coordinator in the middle of the season. And I've been clamoring for Clay White to be fired for the last 2 weeks. Not a freaking peep out of Shane Beamer.
Yep.
We can make in-season changes, dog. It's possible. I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Stove, I get holding the kids accountable, but he's talking about the psychiatrist and talking about suicide watch. That's a little bit over the top, right?
Again.
All right, let's jump in. Let's tear this Band-Aid off. Let's talk about how wrong I was. Penn State goes into Columbus, comes out a loser, and they are who we thought they were. The late, great Denny Green.
Yeah.
Penn State still doesn't have a quarterback. Penn State still doesn't have an offense that's willing to push the envelope. You and I were talking about it, and you put it perfectly. They were basically just trying to figure something out that worked, but they weren't willing to take any risk, and they were really hanging it all on the offensive line, and it wasn't going to work. Ohio State's got a great front four, really great front seven.
Yep.
It seemed like in the first half it was run, incomplete pass, punt. just play defense, play the field position battle. In the second half, it was like these weird kind of, we're going to try to run horizontal passes in the second half. You don't have those playmakers, bro. You don't have those guys. You have to get downhill, running the ball, run the play action, and work the seams because that's the personnel you have. And they weren't willing to do that with any sort of conviction. They had no success. Drew Aller, like he flashed early in the season, and I don't know what happened. If it's offensive approach or if it was cupcakes and he's just not that good. I was fooled. Penn State does not have a quarterback. Penn State is not a playoff team. The floor is yours, bud.
Well, first off, I would like to say thank you for saying how correct I was and how right I was.
Yep.
I will say, though, for as bad as Penn State's offense was, if you were to tell me that they went into the horseshoe and held Ohio State to 20 points, I'd say you have a pretty good shot of winning that game,
Yep.
right? The difference in this game was Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
Yep. Anytime they needed a conversion, anytime their offense was sort of stagnant, they called on, what is he, 18?
Find number 18.
Find 18. Throw him the ball.
18's down there somewhere.
Which, when you have a defense like they do, you have a front four like they do,
yep,
that could be good enough to win these games. And Penn State's a good team. Like, Penn State is not a bad football team. They're going to get a New Year's Six bowl probably. They'll probably win out the Michigan game, whatever. We can touch on the Harbaugh situation, how that's going to affect them going forward. But strictly from like an on-field perspective, they're a very good team. They're going to win. They're going to lose 2 games all year long, and they get a good bowl. Like,
yep.
But like I said to you, like, they were putting all of the onus for their offensive production on the offensive line, which was not winning the trench battle, right? Ohio State was winning. They were owning the line of scrimmage. Drew Aller threw the ball 42 times in this game. I don't care who your quarterback is. If he's throwing 42 times, you're in a shootout, which probably means you have a decent shot at losing, right? Like, a 42 pass attempt game is not a recipe for success.
Nope.
At almost any level.
Nope.
They just don't have the playmakers to win this game. You laid that out perfectly. They don't have the horses to run with an Ohio State. I don't know what it's going to take. James Franklin is a fine coach. He's terrible against big opponents, at home and on the road.
Continues to be.
Yeah, like, I'm not here to advocate for his firing, but if Penn State really, really wants to make that leap like Michigan has and Ohio State, like, into the echelon, right? There has to be wholesale changes at the university. And I don't know where it starts, but looking at the offensive playmakers is probably a good place.
What's crazy too is, like, over the last, let's say 4 or 5, maybe even as long as James Franklin really has been there, they've had dudes on the outside. They just haven't had a quarterback. This year, even if Drew Aller had shown he was a good quarterback, they don't have dudes. They don't have dudes on the outside. They don't have Dotson. They don't have Robinson. They don't have any of these dudes on the outside that have been big time playmakers for them over the last handful of years of this run with Franklin, where they just can't get over the hump. It's always been the quarterback can't make a play when it matters, right? This year, even if they had a quarterback that could make a play when it mattered, they just don't have any guys to make plays. They don't have 18, right? Like, they just don't have those guys anymore. And it showed this weekend. They just couldn't get anything going. You mentioned it, 42 pass attempts, and what they ended up like 260, I think, in pass yardage. Like, that's not
191.
191, that's what it was. It might even have been like 260 total yards or something like that.
Yeah.
Not good, man. Not good. 42 attempts and you're under 200 yards. That's terrible. Terrible. Yeah. They're going to get a good bowl game probably because of name recognition, and they're probably going to end up with 2 losses. But I bought fool's gold.
I tried to warn y'all. I gave out Ohio State.
Several weeks you tried to warn me.
I'm telling you, Ohio State's good, man. Ohio State's good.
They are, for sure.
And they have an otherworldly talent.
They do. He's a fucking alien.
Yep.
All right. Let's skip ahead to week 9 here and take a look at this upcoming weekend. There's some big lines here, man. There's some good teams playing some bad teams, sort of like we had last week at the very top. But There's a couple of really intriguing matchups. I want to start with Oklahoma and Kansas because
Yeah.
you mentioned it a moment ago, and this feels like it could be kind of a sneaky game where, you know, is Kansas going to be able to knock off Oklahoma? Do they have the offense to keep up with them? Dylan Gabriel, I expect to have another good game. You got to fix the defense if you're Brent Venables and figure out what went wrong this past weekend, because it doesn't get any easier with this Kansas offense. They've got a lot of speed all over the field. What do you think about this game here? I see you're taking the points. Are you taking money line?
I really would love to, but there's an old adage in football at every level, and maybe the exception was the 18 Bama team. If you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any.
Yeah.
Right? Kansas has two quarterbacks that have both almost thrown for 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
To me, that seems like maybe a quarterback controversy. Now, I understand we're looking at Jalen Daniels maybe being Wally pipped because of an injury. However, if he comes back healthy, it's kind of like, who do you play here, right? And it's Tuesday night. I don't know the actual injury status of him going into the weekend, right? So it's hard to say.
I just double check to make sure, and there's nothing definitive. So
right. That's kind of the thing about doing this early in the week is we're not the injury stuff kind of lingers, right? It's happened all year with Utah. Nobody knows when Cam Rising's going to play, right? I do like the points here. 9.5. We have it written down. It's you can get it at 10 other places, right? That's a lot of points for an Oklahoma team who, for me personally, is not one of the 6 best teams in the country. And Kansas not being ranked at 5-2 with an offense that's as explosive as theirs is feels like kind of a disrespectful statement. But I would not play the money line. I would play the hook, man. The hook freaking gets me. 10. I like 10. I like 9.5. I'm going to play it, obviously. But I like points in this game.
Yeah.
65.5 feels doable to me.
You want that? Oh, yeah. I think we're going to see the over here. This is going to be. I'm going to lay the points. It's going to be sweaty, in my opinion. I think they're going to win by maybe 7 or 10. Right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be right there. A lot of places you may end up with a push. ESPN had it at 9.5. I know other books. I think DraftKings even had it at 10. But yeah, I feel like Oklahoma's going to bounce back. That's my gut feeling with this, is that they're going to take it personally how badly they played against UCF.
Yeah.
And this is a bounce back game for them. It is on the road, right? So this could be a sneaky one. That environment for a basketball campus is surprisingly really good.
Yeah.
With football. Even when they've had like the flash in the pan seasons back with like Charlie Weiss, and when they've snuck into the who was the other Mangino, Les Miles, right? When they'd have a quick up, you'd see a really raucous crowd there in Kansas. So it is surprisingly a good environment for football for being such a heavy basketball campus. But
right,
could be a sneaky game. I'm going to lay the points. I just expect Oklahoma to bounce back.
That's fair.
What's one game that sticks out to you here?
The world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Yeah, buddy.
Georgia, Florida, man. 14.5 is a lot of points for a team that just lost their best player.
Yes.
I do believe in Georgia. I still think that they will be able to win big games down the stretch. I think they're going to win this game. Florida is a team that's on the upswing. They've been playing very well. They just put it on my freaking Gamecocks on the road, right? Their quarterback, whose name is escaping me at the moment, Graham Mertz, is coming off a career high.
Yeah.
He's riding a big wave. Now, obviously, the Georgia defense is much better than the South Carolina defense, but he's getting Pearsall involved on almost every offensive possession. Every play, he's affecting the defense, right? He draws double coverage. They motion him. They do stuff like that. Travis Etienne is Travis is in the league. Trevor Etienne, excuse me, is a heck of a running back that it doesn't get a lot of national coverage. And Florida, excuse me, just always has guys, right? Like they recruit so well in the Southeast. And this is a neutral site game. You know, they're not playing at Sanford Stadium, so the crowd is not going to be backing necessarily either one of these two teams. But 14.5 is a lot for a Georgia team that just lost Brock Bowers.
Yeah, this is one that I have earmarked as kind of a sneaky if I want to throw potential, maybe a few bucks at something that's going to get me a lot of juice. Brock Bowers is the straw that stirs the, for lack of a better term, cocktail there in Georgia. This offense, I expect them to struggle, especially out the gate, trying to figure out what they are without Brock Bowers. This is one that I just look at it and I think, man, Florida's got dudes. If Graham Mertz can continue to play as well as he has the last 2 weeks, I know we've joked several times this year that, like, oh, it's fucking 3:05 p.m. on the East Coast and Graham Mertz still sucks, right? But I don't know, man. He's looked pretty good the last 2 weeks, and they are, as you said, they are on the upswing. I think ETN is a guy that can be a little bit of a difference maker. It's really going to come down to whether or not Georgia gets the offense going without Brock Bowers.
Yep.
I do think that they cover either way, but this is one I've earmarked at like 14.5 points. You're going to get, I think it's like 5.5 to 1 or 6 to 1, something like that.
Yeah.
So could be one that you could sneak a little juice on if you wanted to.
Yep.
What else, man?
There's a big game being played this weekend, and it occurs at 3:30 p.m. And I had an 11 o'clock tea time Saturday morning, so I'm very, very nervous that I might miss a little bit of this game.
Uh-oh.
But Oregon and Utah play this weekend,
Yes,
and
sir.
they play at Utah. And oh, buddy, am I excited to watch this. The only thing that would make this game better is if it was at night.
Yeah.
You play this game at night, that's probably what, like a 4.5 point line as opposed to a 7 in favor of Oregon. We gave Utah a lot of their flowers earlier. We gave Oregon a lot of flowers last week, even though they lost to Washington. Oregon, these are two just really, really good football teams.
Yeah.
Oregon's offense is a little more explosive than is Utah's, but you know, like that gets negated. You know, with the crowd noise, the altitude, just Utah playing at home, like that counts for a lot in my book. 7. This is going to be a 1-score game.
Yep.
Whether it's 3, whether it's 7, whatever it comes out to, right? I expect Utah to cover, and this might be the game that I would think about sprinkling money line.
Yeah, this is one that I don't even think that money line's a crazy bet in this one. In Utah, that defense is nuts. Oregon's offense is great, but their defense has been exposed a bit this year. We could, you know, at the weekly, are we going to see Cam Rising? Are we not? Even without him, though, that offense has found a way to score some points. They just slowed down the high-powered USC offense, which feels a little less of a big deal because of what Notre Dame did to him the week before, but it's still Caleb Williams. It's still USC and what they've got in terms of that offense. I'm with you. I'm taking the points. I think it's a 1-score game. And if you bet this money line, I'm not going to tell you you're crazy. I'm not going to tell you you're crazy.
Yep.
Feels like one that
could another game. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Another game where Kyle Whittingham has a coaching advantage, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. By a long stretch. Stretch for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, Dan Lanning showed his fucking colors against Washington. I don't know what they were doing there, but they could easily win that game without him.
Yeah. So I know we've talked about trap games and stuff in the past, and we mentioned a team. I believe we talked about them fairly for a decent amount of time last week, right? Oregon State goes on the road to Arizona this weekend.
Yeah.
Now they're getting 3.5, right? They're laying 3.5, so they're the favorite in this game. This is another one. It wouldn't shock me. A home dog pulls it out and wins straight up.
Yep.
Arizona, I know you talked about them very glowingly, and I kind of co-signed the things that you were saying, but they got this freshman quarterback, man, that can flat out play.
There's something going on there.
Arizona, a sneaky good. They're obviously a basketball school, right? Got it. 100% understood. One of the best teams in the future Big 12. Yeah. But they low-key, I've been to their stadium at night, and I've heard that crowd there in Tucson. Sneaky good football program out there in the desert. They're 4-2. They're 2-2 in the conference, right? Like they're going to be looking to make a little bit of noise here. This might be a position where we see DJ Uiagalelei like really struggle for the first time this year, right?
Yeah.
I like Arizona. I prefer Oregon State, right? It would not shock me if they cover and kind of win this game handily, but at the same time, I think that Arizona is a good program, and I could also just as easily see them winning this game outright.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they've got just magic. Yeah, I can't even describe it. It's one of those things that you see these things happen where a guy goes down, and you mentioned the Wally Pipp thing. I like to call it the Ewing syndrome as well, where your star goes down and suddenly your team like rallies and plays better. It feels a little bit like that. Plus, young man can fucking play.
Yes.
Laura might not get his job back. Honestly, he might not. He might be in the transfer portal this offseason because Fafita, I believe is his name. I always mispronounce it. I always want to put like 2 more I's in it. I don't know why. But he could play, and he might be the future of this program.
Yeah.
Especially if they keep winning. Laura might be looking for some work this offseason in the transfer portal. So, yeah, I like Arizona. I like the points, the 3 in the hook. Give me that because I think it is going to be a tight game. Wouldn't surprise me if Arizona knocks off Oregon State at home.
Yep.
Any others on the docket look real intriguing to you?
Yeah, so the early slate this weekend is really kind of where the best games are, in my opinion, with Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Florida, Utah, Oregon. But there's some night games that should be pretty good, right? Obviously, we have Duke, Louisville. Louisville's laying 4 at home. I don't exactly know how to gauge this game because of the injury to Riley Leonard. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. If Riley Leonard were playing, obviously the line would be different. But if you told me right now that the line was not changing and Leonard was playing, I would absolutely take Duke +4.
I would have taken the points as well if you told me.
100%. 100%. There's a game that I know a very close friend of mine has ties to, as he was a student at Kentucky. Tennessee is going on the road to Kentucky. This is a heated rivalry, right? It's a border war. Kentucky's not a bad football team. They laid an egg against freaking Georgia, and I think people kind of had this bad taste in their mouth about them. But that's a team that likes to slow the game down and run the rock, right? Yeah. Now, we mentioned early in the year that they brought in Drew Leary, who's just kind of this big-armed guy and can sling it everywhere. But similar to Penn State, they don't really have the horses on the outside to do that. They're not a high-flying offense. They like to run the ball down your throat. And Tennessee is a team that can be had in the run game, right? Yep. They're a team that Alabama did it to them last weekend. Even South Carolina had success running the ball against them. So I'm not – I like Tennessee in this game. I don't have a strong lean one way or the other, though. Obviously, Vegas is very good at setting these lines, but that's just a game that I'll keep an eye on. I think it should be very fun. It's probably going to be like a rock fight, maybe a knockdown, drag out.
Yeah.
Tennessee probably gets 1 or 2 big plays because that's kind of how their offense works. They run, take a shot, and they do that over and over again. But if Kentucky's able to hold the time of possession and really run that ball, I can see them winning this game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, that's going to be the difference, right? Whether Kentucky can slow it down on Tennessee. Because if they get in any sort of shootout, Tennessee, I was worried they weren't going to be able to reload, losing Hyatt and Hooker and all the pieces, the offensive line as well. They lost some pieces on the offensive line.
Yep.
They reloaded. They've got a pretty high-powered offense still. This year, it's not quite what it was last year. Bazooka Joe is not Hendon Hooker. He can throw the ball 100 yards, but he's not Hendon Hooker. Maybe he eventually grows into a similar role, but he's not that right now. But they can still spread it around to some playmakers and move the ball up and down the field. If Kentucky can slow it down on them, this might not be just a cover play for UK. UK. It might be that they knock off Tennessee in this border war, especially at home, man. It's in Lexington.
Yeah,
big time game for sure.
Tennessee also, I could see them blowing this game out and just crushing Kentucky because they're going to be
get the running game going, especially.
Yeah, they're going to be real pissed off after watching Alabama score 27 unanswered on them last week.
Yeah, how about a fucking tale of 2 halves there?
That's a game we didn't really hit on, but that tide is still rolling, boys.
It's still rolling. It took a little break in the first half, but it's picked right up where it left off the week before once
Yep.
they got to the second half last week.
Absolutely.
Any others on the docket you want to touch on?
Yeah, so this kind of the theme of the show, I think, has been trap games, right? We've talked about it a couple times. Ohio State goes on the road to Wisconsin this weekend.
Yep.
Talk about a trap game, dude. A
Yep.
night game in Camp Randall. Jump around's going to be playing. The stadium's going to be rocking. Ohio State coming off a huge win against Penn State. 14.5 is the line. I don't know, man. Something about night games in the Big Ten, they just get funky.
Yeah.
I kind of like Wisconsin, I'm not going to lie. Not to win, but to cover.
Yeah. It's a lot of points. 14.5. You're talking about winning by more than 2 touchdowns, right? More than your standard 2 touchdowns. But I don't know, man. I just like Wisconsin. Not a good football team this year. They're not. They're trying to remold their image with the coaching change and the style of offense. They want to go to this spread them out, air raid, run and gun style that they ran at Cincinnati with Jerome Ford and all those weapons on the outside with Desmond Ridder. They don't have the personnel right now, so I could see Ohio State skunking them and really just shutting this offense down. They have 2 really talented running backs, and they just don't use them.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. To be fair, they're gonna have to use them this week because Tanner Mordecai did break his hand, and he's struggling on the physical front.
Yeah,
but in Wisconsin's defense, they lost on the road to Washington State, and they lost at home to an Iowa team who has a lockdown defense. Right? I mean, it's not like they've lost to bad teams. They just they're it's like you said, they're just not a really good football team.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah,
but again, night games, dude.
Night games, they get weird. They do. Night games in college football in general get kind of weird. They can.
Funky stuff happens in night games.
Anything else on the slate before we get to the totem?
Shout out JMU, ranked this week. Good for them. I told my
football program in Virginia.
Yeah, I told my buddy who's a JMU alum that we need to set up a bowl game between South Carolina and JMU and just let them go play because neither of them are going to be bowling this year.
Jeez. All right, well, let's jump into the totem this week. A little bit of change, especially on mine. And I made a pretty drastic change, and it kind of was on a piggyback of what I talked to you about this weekend. I am prepared to say that despite leaving Georgia on top because they're on a 22-game win streak, I think Michigan's the best team in college football. I think that Michigan right now, if I had to pick my national champion, it's Michigan. They are a complete football team. They have fixed the woes at the quarterback position. They've got guys on the outside. Blake Corum is still crushing it. They've got a great offensive line, and they can fucking beat you up on defense. They've got enforcers at all 3 levels. Their defensive line will get after you. Their linebackers will punch you in the mouth. And they've got a couple of safeties that'll fucking fly all over the field. I like this Michigan team. I've been really stubborn about Penn State all year. Now that little pus pocket has broken, Michigan, I'm all in. Move them up to 2. I've got Ohio State at 3, and I round out with OU. I dropped Washington out this week. That was a really ugly game against Arizona State. Even though OU barely held on, I felt like they played a better game than Washington did against the opponent that they had, UCF versus Arizona State. I think UCF's a better team than Arizona State, so to me, to be pushed by UCF is a little more respectable than what Washington did against Arizona State. Talk to me about your totem. You shook it up a little bit. Washington dropped out for you. Ohio State moved up in. Texas still hanging on there at 6 despite the struggles against Houston.
Yep. So reasoning for moving Washington out, they struggled against a team they shouldn't have struggled against. Ohio State has more better, I know that's not correct, they have more quantity, better quality wins than does Washington. I said it early in the year that I think it was after the Notre Dame game that this was a playoff team in Ohio State, and it was not a playoff team that had a superstar quarterback. It's a playoff team of old school national title contention, Ohio State quality, where they have a great defense. They have at least one guy, we know Abukam or Abuke, opposite side of Marvin Harrison Jr. If he ever gets fully healthy this season, that would give them two kind of freak guys on the outside. They win the line of scrimmage. They have good running backs, and they don't ask their quarterback to do too much, right? I leave Texas in there. We talked about Quinn Ewers, being injured, whatever. I think they have enough talent to kind of ride out whatever injury timeline he has going forward. They don't play super difficult games down the stretch until they get to the title game. And then leaving Georgia at the top for obvious reasons, like you said, 20-something game winning streak. The Michigan one is very interesting to me. I tend to agree with you that if you ask me right now who's the best team in college football, I would probably say Michigan, but I can't put a Big Ten team over an SEC team after what I've seen for the last 15 years. So I just can't do it. Not yet. I need to see it happen before I can justify to myself doing that.
SEC is still the big dog.
They just are. I mean, they're better. They may not be better like 1-2 at the top, but they're better 3 through 9. 16, like, yeah. I mean, that's just how it is. That being said, I would like to kind of touch on the Jim Harbaugh stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
I would like to be the first to say, welcome to Chicago, Jim Harbaugh. Here's Caleb Williams, your new quarterback. This Jim Harbaugh stuff does not look good.
No.
There's using my analytical mind to try to not be biased here, right? There is what appears to be video evidence in last year's game against Ohio State of this guy named Stallion or whatever on a sideline watching the Ohio State sideline as they're making a play call audible at the line, looking at his sheet, and then telling his team that they're switching to a pass play, right? That is circulating the internet currently. You can clear as day see it's Ohio State. You see C.J. Stroud in the backfield, check, look to the sideline, and then it focuses on the Michigan sideline. These are real allegations, right? Like these are vacate wins allegations. This is stuff that it had happened to Pete Carroll when he was not this exact, right? That was recruiting stuff. But Jim Harbaugh has had the recruiting stuff as well, right? Like Jim Harbaugh has a checkered past at Michigan, and he has not been there that long.
Yeah.
These are allegations that I think could force his exodus from Ann Arbor, potentially back to the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chicago would probably welcome him with open arms in terms of having that first pick potentially. This really is like vacate wins, and in the midst of a run that they've been on, it's real trouble. I wonder, in the grand scheme, how much of this is Eric Mangini versus Bill Belichick and whoever. I'm not going to name names, Ryan Day, but whoever turned in Jim Harbaugh should be really, really careful about what they're doing, because Eric Mangini has said several times that it was something everybody was doing, and there's a reason they didn't really get smacked with Spygate punishment, and he regretted it a lot after he did it. So I know this is a heated rivalry. I know it's Ryan Day versus Jim Harbaugh. I know it's Ohio State, Michigan, but be careful. Be careful. Don't shit in your own living room.
Yep.
Because this could be a situation where we get a lot of allegations that come flying back and forth, and it could get a little. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this like a slap on the wrist, maybe swept under the rug. I don't know. I don't think the NCAA wants to open this Pandora's box. I don't think. But
who knows? Only time will tell.
Vacate win allegations, though, because it is a direct violation of the bylaws within college football.
Yep.
All right, bud. Well, that brings us to the conclusion this week. You got any closing thoughts for us?
The NBA starts tonight. Check out our Thursday night pods with our boy Ryan. It's Gary, myself, and Ryan. We talk NBA. We're going to be on you guys all season long, talking, I don't know, any number of things. Whatever topics we feel are relevant to the NBA season. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have y'all.
Yes, sir. We've got regular season basketball to talk about, finally.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Well, for Bentley and everybody else at the Backyard family, this has been another episode of Tailgate Trash Talk. We are out.